Welcome to Chalke Talk. This is the first of a series of short videos that's going to explore questions around our model of church and ask, is it fit for the 21st century? And if not, what do we need to change? It was exactly 500 years ago that Martin Luther, the German priest and scholar, nailed his 95 theses or questions or complaints to the door of the castle church in Wittenberg. And his action kick-started what we call the Reformation, the birth of Protestant churches as they broke away from Catholicism. Luther complained about indulgences. They were certificates that priests issued for money so that people or their relatives could get time off purgatory. But he was actually complaining about much more. For him, the shape of the established church and its relationship with the state just didn't fit with the needs of the world in which he was called to live and serve. His world had been changing and changing fast. So we're going to take a very quick look at 3 trends and 2 people that influenced Luther and helped create the environment in which he thought and worked and the necessity for change. The first is the Renaissance. That's the whole period of European development between the 14th and 17th century. It's kind of regarded as the cultural bridge between the old Middle Ages and modern history and modern thinking. By the 16th century, in other words, by the time Luther was alive, its influence was felt right across Western Europe in literature, philosophy, art, music, politics, science, and of course religion. It was a subtle shift that took place about the way that intellectuals approached their whole way of thinking. It was a new quest for learning, and as part of it, many old ancient Greek texts, in fact the New Testament itself, were brought back from the East, from Byzantium, Constantinople, to Western Europe. And for the first time in about 1,000 years, Western scholars engaged in study with these original texts. All this helped pave the way for Luther and the Reformation. The second influence was the development of banking as it spread from northern Italy right across Western Europe during the 15th and 16th centuries. That was because subsistence living was disappearing, and now you could be independently wealthy and therefore independent. The third influence was the invention of the printing press in around 1440. By 1500, printing presses were in operation across Western Europe. It was the social media of the day. Information was available to the many, if not to the masses, because it was still very expensive for the first time. Together, these 3 great influences shaped the environment into which Luther was thinking and working. They created a new sense of autonomy, a new sense of individualism, and therefore the soil for independent thinking, a new kind of world. There were also 2 people, contemporaries of Luther, that perhaps influenced his thinking more than anyone else. The first of these was Machiavelli, the Italian politician and philosopher and writer, who's often been called the father of modern political science. In 1513, just 5 years before Luther nailed his thesis to the door of that church, Machiavelli wrote The Prince. So subversive was this book that it wasn't actually published widely until 1532, 5 years after he died. But a private version appears to have been around, and perhaps Luther got to read it. Whether or not he actually read it, we know that he was influenced by Machiavelli's thought, which was all about autonomy and independence. One man that we know that Luther actually knew and corresponded with was Erasmus, and he's the second thinker that influenced Luther. He was a Dutch Renaissance thinker, a Catholic priest and a theologian, and he was highly critical of the church and its doctrines. Amongst many other books, he translated the New Testament from Greek and also a Latin version. And his thinking and other books raised loads of questions about the church's practice. It influenced Luther's thought. But while Erasmus was critical of the abuses, many of them within Catholicism, and he called for reform, he remained until his dying day a loyal member of that church, committed to reforming Catholicism and its clerical abuses from inside. Luther had huge admiration for him and for his superior learning, but he was annoyed by the fact that Erasmus, as Luther saw it, wouldn't stand up and be counted for change. So it was that Martin Luther came to nail his 95 theses or points of debate to the door of that church in Wittenberg, and it became the catalyst for what we call the Reformation. Of course, Luther got lots right and he got lots wrong, and John Calvin and many others debated his thinking over the years and centuries to come, but he was a huge influence on the whole church, both the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation within Catholicism. So today, in the early years of the 21st century, it seems clear to me that once more the shape of the established church, the way we do things, no longer fits the needs of our world, the world in which we're called to live and serve. We live in a world that's globally connected. We can get all sorts of worldviews instantly on our phone. While the preacher's preaching, we're checking on our smartphones to see whether she or he is right or wrong. We live in an age that's information rich. We live in an age that's suspicious of institutions. We don't trust them, we trust our friends. Hierarchy is disappearing, or we don't believe in it and we don't want it. We want to be more organic than that. When I was a kid, my vicar used to stand in his pulpit and tell us what was right and wrong and how to understand the Bible. We don't go to church for information, if we go at all anymore. We go for community because that's what we crave. Community, openness, transparency, honesty, places where we can debate and question and be honest about our doubts. So what kind of church do we need for the 21st century? Is it time for a new Reformation? What do you think? I'll see you next week.